Hello everyone, welcome to the third lecture. The plan for this lecture is as follows. In this lecture we will discuss some of the historical ciphers such as shift cipher, monoalphabetic substitution cipher and polyalphabetic substitution cipher, and we will see their cryptanalysis, namely we will see how badly these ciphers were broken. We will see the lessons that we learned from these historical ciphers, and finally we will discuss the principles of modern cryptography. So, let us discuss the shift cipher, which is a very simple symmetric encryption process, and in the shift cipher the plain text and the ciphertext characters belong to the alphabet of some natural language. So, for instance, we assume that the plain text and ciphertext characters belong to the English alphabet set, namely the set of set of letters A to Z. And the encryption process here to shift each instance of the plain text character by k positions forward, and the decryption process is to shift back each ciphertext character by k positions in the backward direction. And the shift here, namely the value of k, is going to be one of the values in the set 0 to 25, which is randomly selected by the key generation algorithm. So, the mathematical interpretation of the shift cipher is as follows. Since the plain text characters are belonging to the set A to Z, we interpret the character A as the symbol 0, character B as the symbol 1, and in the same way we interpret the character Z as the symbol 25. That is a mapping we assume is available both to the sender and the receiver or to any third party who is going to use an instance of shift cipher. Now, the key space here is a set 0 to 25, because the actual value of shift, namely small k, is going to be one of the value randomly selected in this set. And the plain text space and the ciphertext space is going to be the set of strings over the set 0 to 25, because my plain text is going to be any English text where the characters of the plain text will be mapped to the alphabet in the set 0 to 25. And in the same way the ciphertext, which is going to be some text over the set 0 to 25, will be interpreted as some string over the set 0 to 25. So, syntactically the key generation algorithm for the shift cipher is as follows. The key generation algorithm is going to output a uniformly random value, namely small k, which is going to be the value of shift which sender and receiver are going to use, and this shift is going to be a random value from the key space. So, the notation here belonging to subscript r denotes that the output of the key generation algorithm, namely small k, is randomly selected over the key space, and the randomness here is uniform randomness. So, the notation belonging to r denotes that the value is uniformly selected over the set capital K. So, that is the interpretation of the notation belonging to subscript r. The syntax for the encryption algorithm of the shift cipher is as follows. So, imagine we are given an English text which we are interpreting as a string over the set 0 to 25. That means each character of the plain text is a symbol in the set 0 to 25. So, the encryption of the ith plain text character happens as follows. We take the ith plain text character mi, and we have the value of shift, which is going to be any of the value in the range 0 to 25, and the encryption algorithm produces the ith ciphertext character, where the ith ciphertext character is the summation of the ith plain text character with the shift modulo 26. Now, this operation modulo 26 ensures that we do not do the wraparound if we are actually going beyond the value 25. What I mean by this is, if for example your mi, the ith plain text character, is say a, and if my value of k is say 25, right, or say my ith plain text character is say b, and if my value of k is 25, then if b gets mapped to 1 and my k is 25, and if I add 25 to 1, actually I will be crossing the value the range of values that is allowed for the ciphertext characters, namely 0 to 25. That means I have to do a wraparound, and that effect of wraparound is happening by doing the modulo operation here. So, that is the encryption process of the shift cipher. And analogously we have the corresponding decryption operation, where we take the ith ciphertext character, the value of shift, and to recover back the ith plain text character, we simply go back k positions back from the ith ciphertext character, and if required we do the wraparound by doing the modulo operation, modulo 26 operation, right. So, now let us try to analyze the security of shift cipher, and we will do the analysis in the simplest possible attack model, namely the ciphertext only attack model, where the scenario is the following. We assume that we have a sender and a receiver, and sender has encrypted an English text consisting of L characters, where each of the characters belongs to the set 0 to 25, and there is a random value of shift which has been already agreed upon between the sender and the receiver. The adversary has intercepted the ciphertext, which consists of L ciphertext character, and it knows that the ith ciphertext character is related to the unknown ith plaintext character by this relationship. So, here mi as well as the k is unknown to the attacker, and the goal of the attacker is to recover back the message. So, the simplest possible attack which the adversary can launch here is what we call as the brute force attack. And the idea behind a brute force attack is the following. What adversary has to do is, it knows that the value of unknown k is one of the possible values in the range 0 to 25. So, what it can do is, it can take the ciphertext C and it can think in its mind all possible candidate values of k, and it can try to decrypt the ciphertext as per the candidate case itself, because it knows the corresponding decryption process as well. And as soon as it hit upon the candidate key for which the decryption gives back a meaningful text, by meaningful I mean a meaningful English text, it knows that it has hit upon the right key, and hence the recovered message is indeed the right message with high probability. And this attack is very easy to launch, because here adversary has to do the computation, namely the decryption of the ciphertext only with 26 candidate keys, which is very easy to perform. Consequently, we can say that shift cipher can be very easily broken by just doing a brute force attack. So, the important lesson that we learned from this attack is what we call as sufficient key space principle, which states that any secure cipher should have enormously large key space, namely the set of candidate keys should be enormously large, so that it becomes impractical for the adversary to do a brute force kind of attack. That is the bare minimum condition, necessary condition that we require for a cipher to be secure. So, now let us see how we can fix the problem that is associated with the shift cipher to prevent a brute force attack, and this leads to another interesting cipher which we call as monoalphabetic substitution cipher. And the idea here is, instead of shifting each plaintext character by the same unknown amount k, we shift each plaintext character by a different amount in a 1-to-1 mapping. What I mean here is the following. We know that the plaintext characters could be any of the characters in the range A to Z or 0 to 25. What we do is, we map this plaintext character in a 1-to-1 mapping to the set of ciphertext character A to Z. That means the key is going to be a secret permutation of the set 0 to 25, which is going to be known only to the sender and the receiver. For example, if we take this specific permutation which maps the plaintext character A to B, that means in the plaintext, wherever the plaintext character is A, all those instances of A are going to be replaced by B. In the same way, wherever in the plaintext we have the character C, all those instances of C are going to be replaced by Z, and so on. Since the receiver also knows the same secret permutation, on receiving the ciphertext it has to just perform the reverse operation. Wherever it is seeing the ciphertext character Z, it has to replace it with C, and so on. So, the decryption operation can be performed by the receiver. Now, you can see the candidate key space here is extremely large, namely the set of possible keys is actually 26 factorial, because each key is nothing but a permutation of the set A to Z, and there could be 26 factorial such candidate keys. So, if the adversary tries to do a brute force attack, which we saw in the context of shift cipher, the amount of brute force or the computation that the adversary has to perform is of order of magnitude 2 to the power 88, which is enormous amount of computation. That means we can definitely say that brute force attack is not possible to launch over the shift substitution cipher. But that does not necessarily mean that that is the only attack possible on the monoalphabetic substitution cipher. In fact, it turns out that there is a very interesting attack which we call as the frequency analysis attack, and this attack can be launched on any cipher where the underlying plaintext space is a natural language, which is actually the case for our example, because we are considering a setting where the plaintext are actually English text. So, the idea here is to exploit the redundancy which is available in any natural language, for example English. What I mean by redundancy is the following. If we consider long English text, then we know that on an average the character E occurs more frequently compared to any other character. In the same way, we know on an average in long English text the character T occurs more frequently compared to the character U, and so on. Not only we have the average English letter frequency available for long English text, we can also say that we are available with the average frequency of English bigrams in long English text. For example, we know that in long English text on an average the bigram TH occurs more frequently compared to the bigram ND, and so on. And in the same way, we have the frequency of most popular English trigrams, and so on. And this is a public data available to any user in the universe. So, the idea behind the frequency analysis is that even though each character of the plain text got mapped to a different ciphertext character, the relationship between most frequently occurring ciphertext character and the plain text character is preserved. That means, if the attacker sees an enormously long ciphertext corresponding to the encryption of enormously long English plain text, then what the adversary can do is it can perform or it can prepare a chart similar to the chart of average English letter frequency, where it will tell him which ciphertext character is occurring most frequently compared to other ciphertext character, and so on. So, for instance, imagine that after preparing this chart, adversary finds out that the hypertext character R occurs the maximum amount of time. So, what the adversary can think in his mind that the ciphertext character R corresponds to the plain text character E, and so on. In the same way, the relationship between the most frequently occurring ciphertext bigram and the most frequently occurring plain text bigram is preserved, and so on. So, by doing the comparison, adversary can easily find out the corresponding secret permutation between the plain text character space and the ciphertext character space with which the sender and the receiver are operating the instance of monoalphabetic substitution cipher. So, as you can see, even without doing the brute force attack, adversary could easily recover the secret permutation, and hence the monoalphabetic substitution cipher can be very easily broken in the ciphertext only attack model. Right. So, now let us see another interesting historical cipher which we call as polyalphabetic substitution cipher, and which is also called as Wigner's cipher after the name of its inventor. And the idea here is to fix the potential problem that was there in the context of monoalphabetic substitution cipher. Namely, the idea here is to invoke multiple instances of shift cipher in such a way that in each instance a plain text character is mapped to different ciphertext character. That means, it is not going to happen that wherever the plain text character A is A, it always get mapped to a specific ciphertext character. That is not going to happen. That means, the relationship between the most frequently occurring plain text character and the most frequently occurring ciphertext character is going to be disturbed. And the way we achieve this is as follows. So, again here the message and the plain text space and the ciphertext space is the set of all possible is a set of strings over the set 0 to 25, and the key space is now going to be a string of length t, where t is also randomly selected by the key generation algorithm, and the value of t could be anything with the minimum value of t being 1, and the value of key is going to be any string of length t over the set 0 to 25. That means, your key generation algorithm is going to output a key consisting of t characters, where t is also randomly selected by the key generation algorithm, and each character of the key is going to be one of the values in the set 0 to 25, right. That is a key generation algorithm, and the encryption algorithm happens as follows. So, imagine the sender has a plain text. What sender is going to do is the following. It is going to divide its plain text into blocks of t, t, t. It might be the case that the plain text is not actually a multiple of t. So, it might be possible that the last block may not be a multiple of t, but for simplicity assume that the last block is also a multiple of t. Once the message is divided into blocks of size t and t and t, the idea here is to encrypt each of the block using the key by running an instance of shift cipher. Namely, we produce the ith ciphertext block as follows. So, imagine that the characters in the ith block are mi1, mi2 and mit. So, there are t such characters, and we have the key characters k1, k2 and kt. So, the idea here is we produce the ith ciphertext the characters of the ith ciphertext blocks are Ci1, Ci2 and Cit, where the jth character of the ith ciphertext block is obtained by shifting the jth plain text character by the shift kj modulo 26. So, let me demonstrate what exactly I am trying to say. Imagine that the value of t is 6 here, okay, and a key which is randomly generated by the key generation algorithm, suppose it is the character cipher, namely we map C to 2, I to 8 and so on. That means, this is the random key which is generated by the key generation algorithm, and it is known both to the sender as well as to the receiver, right. Now, assume the plain text which sender wants to encrypt is the English message, this crypto system is not secure. So, what the first step to encrypt this plain text will be to map each of the characters in the plain text to the set 0 to 26, namely to the characters 0 to 26. So, for example, T gets mapped to 19, H gets mapped to 7 and so on. Once we convert the English plain text into letters in the range 0 to 26, next we divide the message into blocks of 666 because our key is of size 6 characters. So, as you can see in this particular example, the last block is not a multiple of 6, so it consists of only 3 symbols, that is fine. Now, what we do is we encrypt the first block as follows. The key for our example is the string 2, 8, 15, 7, 4 and 17. What we do is we add these letters or the symbols or numbers to the block 19, 7, 8, 18, 2 and 17, and each of the addition is performed modulo 26. Namely, the character 19 is get shifted by 2, and since we are not crossing the range 0 to 26, we obtain 21. In the same way, the character 7 gets shifted by 8 to obtain the character 15, and in the same way the last character of the first block, which is 17, gets shifted by the amount 17 to obtain the character 6. So, now you can see, since we are actually crossing the range 0 to 25, we do the mod 26 operation to do the wraparound, and as a result of doing the wraparound, we get the ciphertext character as 6. In the same way, we take the second block and again we add the characters of the key one by one and do the modulo 26 operation. And consequently, once we obtain the ciphertext characters where the alphabets belong to the set 0 to 26, each of those alphabet characters get mapped back to the English character set, and as a result, this will be the encryption, this string will be the encryption of the plain text, this crypto system is not secure. At the receiving end, the receiver is also going to perform the same operation. It will divide its ciphertext into blocks of 666, and in this case the last block will consist of 3 characters, interpret them as symbols in the range 0 to 25 and then subtract each of the key character modulo 26 to obtain back the plain text. That is the way we are going to perform the encryption and decryption operation in the Wigner cipher. And now the idea here is the following. If you see the encryption and the if you see the plain text and the cipher text, what I have highlighted here is all the instances of the symbol S, right. So, you see each instance of the symbol S gets mapped to different ciphertext character. For example, the first instance of the plain text character S gets mapped to Z, right. The second instance of the letter S gets mapped to V and so on. And the reason this is happening is because each time the value S gets shifted by different amount, which depends upon the position of the plain text character S, that means where exactly it is occurring and by how much amount it gets shifted. The amount of shift by which S is getting shifted will not be same across all the instances of the letter S, because that depends upon the position of the letter S as well as the value of the character of the key which is going to be used for shifting the instance of S, right. As a result, we are actually somehow disturbing the pattern which is available between the plain text and the ciphertext character. That means, we can no longer say that the most frequently occurring ciphertext character corresponds to the most frequently occurring plain text character and so on. So, now you can see one may feel that Wigner cipher is really difficult to break, but it turns out that we can actually perform the crypt analysis of Wigner cipher. That means, we can break the Wigner cipher in the ciphertext only attack model itself. and attack happens by performing a two-stage approach. In stage 1, the goal will be to determine the length of t, namely the size of the period of the key, right. So, remember t could be any value starting from 1 onwards, and there are several well known methods, an interesting method to determine the value of t. So, for example, you can use Kaczynski's method, or there is another interesting method called index of coincidence method, and so on. Once we know the value of t, in stage 2 what we are going to do is we are going to recover back the unknown characters of the key, and once we know the unknown characters of the key, we can easily perform the decryption operation and recover back the plain text. So, what I will do is I will assume that we know how to determine the value of t, and I leave it as an assignment for you to go through the references and see these methods and find out how exactly the value of the unknown t can be computed. What I am going to discuss is the following, that once the value of t is known, how to find out the unknown characters of the key, right. And the idea here will be to run t independent instances of frequency analysis. What I mean by that is, imagine the adversary got the ciphertext, because we are assuming we are in the ciphertext only attack model, and its goal is to find out the unknown plain text. The adversary knows the following, that if we consider the first ciphertext character and then the t plus 1th ciphertext character and then the 2t plus 1th ciphertext character and so on, then this constitutes a stream of ciphertext characters, and this stream of ciphertext characters is related to the unknown stream of plain text characters consisting of the first plain text character, t plus 1th plain text character, 2t plus 1th plain text character, and so on, by the relationship is that this stream of ciphertext character is actually a shifted version of the corresponding stream of the plain text characters, where the amount of shift is k1, which exactly adversary wants to compute. In the same way, the adversary can think of second stream of ciphers consisting of the second ciphertext character and 2 plus tth ciphertext character and so on, and it knows that all this second stream of ciphertext character is related to another stream of plain text character, namely the stream of plain text characters consisting of m2 and m of 2 plus t and so on, right, by the relationship that all of them are shifted version, where the amount of shift is some unknown value of k2 and so on. That means, from the viewpoint of the attacker, what attacker can do is it can just separate out and form t independent streams of ciphertext character, and it has to now just perform a frequency analysis on each of these independent streams. And if we assume that the plain text is sufficiently long and the corresponding ciphertext is also sufficiently long, then by performing the frequency analysis on these t independent streams, the adversary could easily recover back the unknown characters of the key, and hence it could recover the complete key. So, that is an interesting method to do the crypt analysis of Wigner's cipher, right. So, what are the lessons we learned from the historical ciphers? The lessons we learned are the following. All of them can be easily broken in ciphertext only attack model. So, imagine how badly they could be broken if we consider this ciphertext or this encryption process to be operated in a more stronger attack model, say the KPA attack model and CPA attack model. There the adversary will be privileged with some more additional information. So, for example, if we consider the CPA attack model, then the adversary not only have access to the ciphertext, it will also have access to the encryption oracle, and hence it could more comfortably break the underlying encryption process. Another lesson that we learned from the historical ciphers is the sufficient key space principle, which says that the bare minimum necessary condition that any secure cipher should have is to ensure that its key space is sufficiently large to make the brute force attack infeasible. And overall, the most important lesson that we learned from the historical ciphers is that designing secure cipher is indeed a tough and challenging task. Ciphers were proposed over a period of time and people thought they are secure, but eventually all of them were badly broken. That brings us to the difference between classical and modern cryptography. If we consider classical cryptography, it was not a science, it was mostly an art, because there were no scientific foundations, no proper definitions, no mathematical security proof, and as a result the end result was very disaster. Whereas modern cryptography is a science and it is based on strong scientific foundations and principles. Namely, the three principles of modern cryptography are: principle 1 is formal security definitions, where we properly and mathematically define what exactly we mean by security. Principle 2 states that once we have the definition and proceed to construct a primitive which satisfies the given definition, then we should precisely state any assumption or namely unproven assumption which we are using in our construction. Looking ahead, we will see in this course that all the crypto primitives that we are going to design, their security will be based on some unproven hardness assumptions. So, principle 2 clearly states that we should precisely state in our construction what exactly is the underlying assumption used in our construction. And principle 3 states that once we have the construction, we have to formally prove that indeed the construction that we have given satisfies the definition that we have given in stage 1. So, that brings me to the end of this lecture. To conclude, we discussed some of the historical ciphers and how badly they were broken, and we also discussed some of the important lessons that we learned from the historical ciphers, and we discussed the principles of modern cryptography. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Thank you.